Tell me it's not her, Lisa whispered, her voice barely carrying over the torrential rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the royal study. Cassian didn't look at her. His jaw clenched, his amber eyes fixed on the embers dying in the hearth. Beside him, Elena adjusted the collar of his silk shirt, a triumphant, sickening smile ghosting her lips. It's complicated, Lisa, Cassian finally muttered. The great Alpha King of Valeria, reduced to a stammering boy by the mere presence of his ex-girlfriend. No, Lisa said, the single word sharp enough to draw blood. She slipped the heavy silver signet ring off her finger, dropping it onto the marble floor. It chimed like a death knell. It's actually very simple. Goodbye, Cassian. Before he could reach for her, she was gone. The heavy oak doors of the study clicked shut, severing Lisa from the man she had loved for 3 years. The sound was horribly final, echoing down the cavernous, vaulted corridors of the Valerian estate. For a fraction of a second, she expected to hear Cassian's heavy boots pounding against the marble, chasing after her. She expected his deep, commanding voice to shatter the tension, ordering her to stay, begging for her forgiveness. Only the rhythmic drumming of the storm against the glass answered her. Lisa didn't run. Running implied fear, and right now, a cold, surgical anger was actively metabolizing the grief in her veins. She walked with a measured, deliberate stride toward the East Wing. Her mind, usually occupied with the logistical nightmares of managing Cassian's political alliances, narrowed to a single, burning directive. Leave. She pushed open the door to their shared suite. The scent of him, pine, smoke, and bergamot, hung heavy in the air, suddenly suffocating. Lisa moved to the mahogany wardrobe. She didn't take the silk gowns he had bought her for the council galas, nor the diamond-crusted jewelry that marked her as the Alpha King's chosen mate. She pulled out a simple leather duffel bag and shoved in her oldest, most durable clothes. Dark denim, heavy woolen sweaters, a pair of worn combat boots. Lisa, she froze. Standing in the doorway was Marcus, Cassian's beta, and a man who had become something of a brother to her. His broad shoulders filled the frame, his usually jovial face pulled tight with concern. "Step aside, Marcus," Lisa said, her voice eerily calm as she zipped the duffel. "I smelled the distress radiating off you from the lower armory," Marcus said, stepping cautiously into the room. His eyes darted to the half-empty drawers, then back to her. "What did he do?" He brought Elena back. Marcus flinched. The subtle tightening of his jaw and the way his hands curled into fists told Lisa everything she needed to know. "You knew," she breathed, the realization dropping like a stone in her stomach. "Lisa, it's not what you think. The Southern Pacts are rebelling. Elena's father controls the largest militia on the border. Cassian needed to secure an alliance by taking her into his private study, by letting her undress him." Lisa slung the bag over her shoulder. "Don't insult my intelligence, Marcus. A political alliance is forged in the council room with ink and blood. What I just walked in on was forged in the past, and it's a past Cassian clearly isn't over." Marcus held out a hand, blocking her path to the door. "He loves you. If you walk out into that storm, you sever the tether. You know the laws of the pact. To leave the territory unannounced is treason." Lisa stepped directly into Marcus's personal space, forcing him to look down into her dark, uncompromising eyes. She didn't have wolf blood, but in that moment, her aura was more dominant than any alpha's. "If you try to stop me, Marcus, I will scream. I will make such a scene that half the estate will come running, and Cassian will have to explain to his entire guard Why the woman he claimed as his equal is fleeing in the dead of night. Do you want to deal with that fallout? Marcus held her gaze for a long, agonizing moment. The silence between them was thick with unspoken apologies. Slowly, he lowered his arm. The back service roads are flooding, he murmured, looking away. Take the northern pass. The guards there shift rotations in 20 minutes. There's a blind spot. Thank you. Lisa slipped past him, descending the servants' staircase into the damp, echoing underbelly of the palace. She found her old, rusted Land Rover, the car she had brought with her when she first arrived in Valeria, waiting in the subterranean garage. The engine sputtered in protest before roaring to life, a gritty, mechanical growl that drowned out the pounding of her heart. As she drove out into the blinding sheets of rain, her tires kicking up gravel, she glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. The highest window of the estate was illuminated. A silhouette stood there, hands pressed against the glass. Cassian. Lisa shifted into high gear, her jaw set, and didn't look back again. The northern pass was a treacherous expanse of jagged cliffs and dense ancient pine forests that separated Valeria from the rival kingdom of Ethelgard. For hours, Lisa navigated the winding, rain-slicked roads, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. The heater in the rover was broken, and the chill of the storm had seeped into her bones. But she welcomed the physical discomfort. It kept her grounded. It kept the memories of Elena's smirk at bay. Ethelgard was known as the Kingdom of Iron and Ice, while Cassian ruled Valeria with a charismatic, fiery passion. King Silas of Ethelgard ruled with absolute, freezing precision. They were mortal enemies, bound by a decades-old blood feud that had claimed the lives of both their fathers. To cross into Ethelgard territory was a death sentence for a Valerian. But Lisa wasn't a Valerian. Not anymore. Around 3 a.m., the rain transitioned into a heavy, blinding sleet. The road deteriorated into a muddy, rutted trail, and despite Lisa's desperate maneuvering, the rover hit a massive sinkhole. The front axle slammed into the mud with a sickening crunch, throwing Lisa against her seatbelt. The engine whined, then died completely, plunging the forest into absolute silence, save for the wind howling through the canopy. Lisa cursed, pounding a fist against the steering wheel. She grabbed a heavy flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the freezing slush. The damage was fatal. The axle was snapped in two. She was miles from the border crossing, stranded in the dead zone. Suddenly, the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. A primal instinct, honed from 3 years of living among apex predators, flared to life. She was being hunted. Lisa didn't turn around immediately. She slowly reached into her coat pocket, her fingers closing around the cold steel of a compact hunting knife. She listened past the wind. There was a faint crunch of snow, a low, vibrating hum that resonated in her chest. "You're out of your jurisdiction, little bird," a voice rumbled from the shadows. It was deep, rough, and entirely devoid of warmth. Lisa turned, clicking on the flashlight. The beam cut through the sleet, illuminating 4 massive wolves, their fur matted with snow, teeth bared in silent snarls. Standing behind them was a man wrapped in a heavy, fur-lined trench coat. He had sharp, aristocratic features, skin pale as marble, and eyes the color of a winter sky. A vicious, jagged scar cut across his left cheek, disappearing into his collar. This wasn't a border patrol. This was the Vanguard. And the man looking at her with dangerous curiosity was General Kale, King Silas's right hand. "I have no jurisdiction," Lisa said, her voice remarkably steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She kept the flashlight aimed at his chest, not his eyes. A sign of respect, but not submission. "I am seeking asylum." Ko let out a sharp, barking laugh. "Asylum?" The Alpha King's prized pet comes crawling to Ethelgard in the dead of night, smelling of valerian pine and heartbreak, and expects a warm bed. He stepped closer, the wolves parting to let him through. "Give me one good reason I shouldn't let my scouts tear you apart and send your bloody coat back to Cassian as a warning." Lisa held her ground as Kyle loomed over her. The scent of ozone and frost rolled off him. She looked him dead in his pale blue eyes. "Because," Lisa said quietly, "I know the layout of the Southern Valyrian militia. I know their supply routes, their patrol schedules, and the fatal flaw in Cassian's new defensive line." Kyle's amusement vanished. The air between them grew impossibly taut. "You would betray your king? He is not my king," Lisa replied, the words tasting like ash and iron. "And I am not a pet. I am a strategist. And if you take me to King Silas, I can give him the southern border on a silver platter." Kale studied her face, searching for a lie, a tremor of fear, a trap. Finding nothing but cold, hardened resolve, he whistled sharply. The wolves backed down, melting into the shadows. "You have guts, little bird," Kyle murmured. "Walk. If you slow down, we eat you." The Ethelgard stronghold, known as the Obsidian Keep, was a monolithic fortress carved directly into the side of a glacier. There was no gold, no silk, no warmth. It was a monument to survival. Lisa was marched through echoing corridors of black stone, flanked by Kyle and 2 armed guards. She was shivering violently, her clothes soaked through, her lips a faint shade of blue. Yet she kept her chin elevated. She was a trespasser in a hostile court, but she refused to look like a victim. Heavy iron doors swung open, revealing the throne room. It was stark, lit only by braziers of blue flame that cast long, dancing shadows across the floor. At the far end sat King Silas. If Cassian was a roaring fire, Silas was the icy void of space. He lounged in a throne of forged steel, his chin resting on a pale hand. He wore no crown, only a tailored black suit that seemed to absorb the light around him. His hair was dark as a raven's wing, and his eyes, black, bottomless, and terrifyingly intelligent, locked onto Lisa the moment she entered. Kale forced her to a halt at the base of the dais. "My king, we found a stray in the Whispering Woods. She claims to have gifts." Silas didn't move. His gaze slowly dragged over Lisa, taking in her muddy boots, her shivering frame, and the absolute defiance in her posture. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive. Most people would have dropped to their knees under that stare. Lisa stared back. "I know who you are," Silas finally spoke. His voice was soft, melodic, and chilling. "Lisa, the human architect behind Cassian's economic resurgence. The woman who negotiated the Treaty of the Eastern Seaboard while the Alphas measured their teeth." He tilted his head. "I expected you to be taller. And I expected the terrifying king of Ethelgard to have better hospitality," Lisa retorted, her voice raspy from the cold. A collective intake of breath echoed from the guards. Kale's hand went to the hilt of his blade. "But Silas?" Silas smiled. It was a small, dangerous curving of his lips. "Leave us," Silas commanded. Kale hesitated. "Sire, she could be an assassin. If Cassian sent a frozen human to assassinate me, he is even more foolish than I thought. Leave." Reluctantly, the guards and Kale filed out, the heavy iron doors sealing Lisa alone with the apex predator of the north. Silas stood, descending the dais with absolute, silent grace. He stopped a few feet from her, crossing his arms. "So," Silas said softly, "the great Alpha King breaks his most valuable asset's heart, and she runs to his greatest enemy. It is almost too poetic to be a trap. Why are you here, Lisa?" "I want asylum, and I want a job." "A job?" Silas chuckled softly. "You want to build my economy? You think I need a Valerian cast-off to manage my kingdom?" "I think you need someone who knows how Cassian thinks," Lisa countered, stepping forward, ignoring the chill. "Cassian acts on emotion. He leads with ego. I managed his temper for 3 years. I know where he is weak. You have the military might, Silas, but you lack the political finesse to hold the southern territories without bleeding your own forces dry. I can give you the strategy to choke Valeria out without spilling a drop of Ethelgardian blood." Silas stared at her, the amusement fading, replaced by a sharp, calculating intensity. He stepped into her space, looking down at her. "You hate him that much? You would burn the kingdom you helped build?" "I didn't build it for him," Lisa said, the memory of Elena's smile flashing behind her eyes, fueling the ice in her veins. "I built it because I am good at what I do. Cassian thought I was just an accessory, a grounding wire for his power." She looked up, her dark eyes reflecting the blue flames. "I want to show him what happens when the wire is cut." Silas reached out, his cold fingers gently tilting her chin up. He searched her eyes, looking for the lie. He found only the abyss. "Very well, Lisa," Silas murmured. "Let's burn Valeria to the ground." For the first 2 weeks in the Obsidian Keep, Lisa lived in a state of calculated survival. She was given chambers in the West Tower, stark, freezing, and guarded around the clock. She traded her mud-soaked clothes for the heavy wools and dark leathers favored by the Ethelgardians. The physical cold was relentless, but she weaponized it. It kept her mind sharp. It froze out the residual ache in her chest whenever the scent of pine or the memory of amber eyes threatened to surface. Silas did not summon her immediately. He left her to isolate, perhaps expecting her resolve to crack. Instead, Lisa requested parchment, ink, and the latest ledger of Ethelgard's western trade routes. Kyle delivered them with a look of masked skepticism, but she ignored him, burying herself in the numbers. When the summons finally came, it was not to the throne room, but to the War Council. Lisa entered a circular chamber dominated by a massive table carved from solid slate. A map of the continent was etched into its surface. Around it stood Silas's highest-ranking generals, hard-eyed men and women adorned in furs and steel. They fell silent as she walked in, their hostility a palpable force in the room. Silas stood at the head of the table. He wore a simple black tunic, yet he commanded the space effortlessly. He didn't offer her a seat. "My generals," Silas began, his voice smooth and carrying perfectly across the stone room, "believe that to secure the Whispering Woods, we must send 3 battalions to burn the Valerian outposts along the Silver River. They argue it is the only way to sever Cassian's supply lines to the rebellious southern packs." He turned his dark, fathomless eyes to Lisa. "You claim to know a better way. Prove your worth, Lisa of Valeria." "Lisa of Nowhere, Your Majesty," she corrected softly. She stepped up to the slate table, acutely aware of the dozen hands resting subtly on sword hilts. She picked up a piece of white chalk. "Burning the outposts will cost you at least 1,000 men in the ensuing skirmishes," Lisa said, her voice steady. She drew a sharp circle around a bend in the Silver River. "Cassian's outposts are heavily fortified, but they aren't self-sustaining. They rely entirely on the neutral merchant guilds from the eastern coast to ferry grain and iron upriver. Cassian pays them handsomely, using the tariffs he collects from the Sapphire Port. General Kale crossed his arms. And how does that help us? The guilds are neutral by treaty. If we attack their ships, we draw the eastern coastal states into the war against us. You don't attack the ships, General, Lisa said, looking at Kale. You attack the profit margin. She drew a line connecting the Ethelgardian mountain passes to the eastern coast. The guilds use the Silver River because it's fast, but they pay exorbitant docking fees at Cassian's port. If King Silas signs a decree subsidizing overland travel through the Ethelgard passes, removing all tolls for guild caravans and offering military escort through the mountains, the land route suddenly becomes 30% cheaper than the river route. The room went dead silent. The guilds are loyal to gold, not kings, Lisa continued, setting the chalk down. Within 3 weeks, the river traffic will dry up. Cassian's outposts will starve. He will be forced to reallocate troops from the southern border to guard the empty river simply to save face, weakening his grip on the rebellion. You choke him out, and it doesn't cost you a single drop of Ethelgardian blood. She looked up, meeting Silas's gaze. The Ethelgardian king was perfectly still. His black eyes drifted from the chalk lines on the map to Lisa's face. The corners of his mouth twitched upward in a slow, genuinely fascinated smile. Draft the decree, Silas murmured, not breaking eye contact with her. Sire, this is a merchant's trick, a grizzled commander protested. We are warriors. Wars are won with steel, Commander, Silas replied, his tone suddenly dropping in temperature, freezing the dissenter in his tracks. Kingdoms are won with ledgers. The decree will be sent to the guilds by nightfall. He stepped away from the table, closing the distance between himself and Lisa. He was taller than she was, smelling of frost and old parchment. You have earned your keep, strategist, Silas said softly, for her ears alone. Let us see how the Alpha King likes starvation. Cassian stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, staring blindly at the sun-drenched gardens of the Valerian estate. It had been exactly 21 days since the rainstorm. 21 days since the heavy silver signet ring had clattered against the marble floor. It still sat exactly where she had dropped it. He forbade anyone, even the cleaning staff, from touching it. The estate felt hollow. The silence in the corridors was deafening. Cassian, darling, you have to look at these seating charts for the Equinox Gala. Elena's voice broke his reverie. She lounged on the leather sofa, twirling a strand of golden hair around her finger. She looked beautiful, radiant even, in a crimson gown that perfectly matched the Valerian colors. Yet, every time Cassian looked at her, a bitter taste flooded the back of his throat. Give them to the steward, Elena, Cassian grunted, rubbing his temples. A vicious headache had been gnawing at him for days. I tried, but he said the High Council Lords refused to sit next to the minor pack alphas. Lisa usually handled this. Elena trailed off, a flash of irritation crossing her face. Well, she left it a mess. Cassian turned sharply, his amber eyes flashing with a sudden, dangerous dominance. Do not speak her name. Elena shrank back slightly, masking her fear with a pout. Before she could push the issue, the heavy oak doors burst open. Marcus strode in, bypassing protocol entirely. The beta's face was grim, his jaw set in a hard line. He carried a stack of dispatches, clutching them tightly enough to crumple the parchment. We have a crisis, Marcus said, ignoring Elena entirely. Cassian straightened. The Southern Rebellion? No. The Silver River. Marcus tossed the dispatches onto Cassian's desk. The merchant guilds have suspended all river traffic. Our outposts are completely cut off. Commander Thorne reports they have enough grain for 2 weeks. After that, they starve. Cassian crossed the room in 3 long strides, scanning the top letter. Suspended. Under whose authority? We have a treaty with the guilds. They invoked the profitability clause, Marcus said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. Silas of Ethelgard just abolished all mountain tolls and offered free military escorts for overland caravans. The guilds have rerouted their entire supply chain through the north. We are holding an empty river, Cassian. Cassian stared at the parchment, the words blurring together. The strategy was flawless. It was non-aggressive, perfectly legal, and entirely devastating. It was a surgical strike against Valeria's economy, designed to bypass their superior military strength. It was brilliant. Cassian's blood turned to ice. He looked up at Marcus. The beta was staring back at him, and in his eyes, Cassian saw the exact same horrifying realization. Silas of Ethelgard was a warlord. He was a tactician of brutality and fear. He did not draft economic subsidies. He did not read guild treaties to find loopholes. No, Cassian whispered, taking a step back as if the desk itself had burned him. The Northern Guard patrols reported a blind spot breach 3 weeks ago, Marcus said, his voice flat, devoid of any comfort. The night she left, tire tracks leading into the dead zone, right toward the Ethelgard border. She wouldn't, Cassian said, his voice shaking. His wolf clawed against his ribs, howling in sudden, blinding panic. She wouldn't go to him. Silas would kill her on sight. Silas didn't kill her, Cassian, Marcus replied. He pointed a heavy finger at the dispatch. He hired her. You gave our greatest enemy the architect of our kingdom. Cassian looked back at the silver ring resting on the marble. The sick realization finally settled in his chest, a heavy, suffocating weight. Lisa hadn't just left him. She had declared war. The great hall of the Obsidian Keep was transformed. The stark black stone was draped in shimmering silver silk, and the braziers burned with a mesmerizing pale blue fire that cast an ethereal glow over the courtiers. It was the Winter Solstice Gala, the most important social event in Ethelgard, where the warlords, nobles, and generals gathered to renew their oaths to the king. Lisa stood near a towering ice sculpture, observing the room with a glass of spiced wine in her hand. She had traded her utilitarian leathers for a gown of deep, midnight blue velvet, embroidered with subtle silver thread that caught the ambient light. The dress lacked the ostentatious diamonds of Valeria, favoring sleek, sharp elegance over display. She looked like she belonged to the ice. She could feel the weight of 100 stairs pressing into her. Whispers trailed her every movement. The Valerian stray, the witch who whispers to the king. They look at you like you are a viper in their nest. Lisa didn't flinch as Cale materialized beside her. The general wore his dress uniform, the jagged scar on his cheek stark against his pale skin. They look at me like I am an unknown variable, Lisa corrected, taking a sip of wine. People fear what they cannot calculate. Kyle let out a low hum. Your little tax trick worked. Valerian troops are retreating from the river. But don't think one clever ledger makes you one of us. I have no desire to be one of you, General. I am here to do a job. A job, yes. Kyle leaned in slightly. Just remember, the king's favor is a precarious ledge. Fall from it, and you will find no net. Before Lisa could reply, the heavy doors at the top of the sweeping grand staircase opened. The hall fell instantly silent. King Silas descended. He wore a high-collared jacket of black velvet, adorned with the silver sigil of a wolf howling against a crescent moon. His presence was a gravitational force, drawing every eye in the room. As he reached the floor, the lords and ladies parted, bowing their heads in deep reverence. Silas acknowledged them with a curt nod, his dark eyes scanning the crowd. They locked onto Lisa. Instead of moving toward the high table, Silas walked directly toward her, the sea of courtiers parting to create a path. The whispers flared up again, a low, frantic hiss. Silas stopped in front of her. He looked her up and down, his gaze lingering for a fraction of a second on the silver embroidery of her gown. "You look—" Silas paused, searching for the word. "Formidable. Is that a compliment in Ethelgard, Your Majesty?" Lisa asked, a slight, challenging tilt to her chin. "It is the highest compliment," Silas replied smoothly. He extended a pale, gloved hand toward her. "Walk with me." A collective gasp echoed from a cluster of nearby noblewomen. For the king to offer his arm to a foreign defector before acknowledging his own court was a scandalous breach of protocol. It was a deliberate, calculated statement of her value. Lisa hesitated for only a heartbeat before resting her hand lightly on his forearm. Through the velvet, his arm felt like forged iron. He led her away from the crowded floor, toward the shadowed arches of the balcony overlooking the glacier. The freezing air rushed in, biting at Lisa's exposed shoulders, but she refused to shiver. "You're making them angry," Lisa noted, looking out at the endless expanse of ice. "Let them be angry," Silas murmured, standing close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him. "They are stagnant. You have brought momentum to this court. I simply wanted them to know whose intellect I value." Lisa turned to look at him, surprised by the candor. In the moonlight, Silas's sharp features were softened, his dark eyes unreadable. "And what happens when my intellect is no longer useful to you?" Silas reached out. For a moment, Lisa thought he was going to touch her face, but his gloved hand bypassed her cheek, his fingers brushing against a loose strand of hair resting on her bare shoulder. The touch was impossibly light, sending a sudden, unexpected jolt of electricity down her spine. "Then I suppose," Silas said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur, "I will have to find other ways to keep you entertained." Before Lisa could process the weight of his words, Cale's heavy boots echoed rapidly against the stone. He burst onto the balcony, his face a mask of fury. "Forgive the intrusion, sire," Cale barked, casting a dark look at Lisa. "The border guard just intercepted a rider in the dead zone." Silas dropped his hand, his demeanor snapping back to the chilling monarch in an instant. "A smuggler?" "No," Cale said, his jaw tight. "He carried the seal of the Alpha King. Cassian has sent an envoy." The music in the great hall had ceased. The ambient chatter of the winter solstice gala was replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against the silver-draped walls. The courtiers parted like the sea, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and ravenous curiosity as King Silas and Lisa descended the grand staircase. Standing in the center of the room, surrounded by 6 armed Ethelgardian guards, was Marcus. The Valerian beta looked terrible. His thick woolen coat was caked in ice and mud, his face pale and drawn from a relentless ride through the dead of winter. Yet he stood tall, his jaw set with the stubborn pride of a wolf in enemy territory. As Silas reached the floor, he didn't walk to his throne. He stopped right in front of Marcus, and deliberately, he kept Lisa at his side. Marcus's eyes shifted from the terrifying monarch to the woman standing beside him. The breath caught in his throat. This wasn't the Lisa who had fled Valeria in a rusted car. This woman wore midnight velvet and silver, standing in the heart of the enemy stronghold not as a prisoner, but as a predator in her own right. An envoy from the Alpha King, Silas said, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. It dripped with aristocratic disdain. To what do I owe this breach of my borders, Beta? Has Cassian come to surrender the Silver River? Marcus tore his gaze away from Lisa and focused on Silas. I bring terms from King Cassian. The economic blockade on the Silver River is an act of veiled aggression. If the decree subsidizing the overland routes is not repealed within 3 days, Valeria will consider it an act of war. We will march on the northern pass. A low murmur rippled through the Ethelgardian lords. War with Valeria was not something to be taken lightly. Their military might was legendary. Silas, however, didn't even blink. He looked down at his gloved hand, seemingly bored. Is that so? Marcus, Lisa said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a silver blade. Marcus flinched. Lisa. Marcus breathed, a look of desperate relief flashing across his exhausted face. Please, you have to stop this. You know what he's doing. You know Cassian will tear this continent apart to get you back. Cassian will do no such thing. Lisa replied, her tone perfectly even, devoid of any warmth. Cassian is currently facing a total collapse of the southern border. His troops in the outposts have been on half rations for a week. The minor packs are withholding their tithes because the trade routes are frozen. Marcus stared at her, horrified. How do you... Because I designed the Valerian supply chain, Marcus, and I know exactly how long it takes to starve it out. Lisa took a step forward, leaving the safety of Silas's shadow. Cassian is bluffing. He cannot afford to march on the northern pass. If he pulls his vanguard away from the south to fight us in the mountains, the rebellion will sweep through his capital in a matter of days. The Ethelgardian generals, including Kale, exchanged looks of grim realization. The Valerian threat was hollow. You're killing us, Lisa, Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. The people you protected, the kingdom you built. I protected a king who repaid my loyalty with betrayal, Lisa corrected coldly. I am merely showing him the true foundation of his power. Go back to Valeria, Marcus. Tell Cassian the decree stands. If he wants the river back, he can pay the Ethelgardian tariffs, 50% on all grain and iron. He will never agree to that. It will bankrupt the crown. Then he will starve, Silas interjected, stepping up right behind Lisa. His presence was a looming, icy mountain. You have your answer, Beta. Escort him back to the border. If he steps foot in my kingdom again, I will send his head back in a box. As the guards seized Marcus's arms, the Beta locked eyes with Lisa one last time. He loved you? He said softly. No, Lisa replied, turning her back on him. He loved how easy I made it for him to be a king. The Valerian war room was in a state of sheer pandemonium. Maps were strewn across the massive oak table, knocked over goblets bleeding wine onto parchment. The roaring fire in the hearth did little to chase away the chill of panic that had settled over the generals. Cassian stood at the head of the table, his hands planted firmly on the wood, his knuckles white. He looked like a ghost of the Alpha King. His amber eyes were bloodshot, his jaw covered in rough stubble. He hadn't slept in 3 days, not since Marcus returned from the Obsidian Keep with Lisa's demands. The Southern Lords have officially severed communications, Commander Thorne barked, slamming a fist onto the table. They are hoarding the winter grain. If we pay the Ethelgardian tariffs, we drain the treasury. If we don't, our outposts mutiny by week's end. We march, another general snarled. "We marched north and burned the obsidian keep to the ground. With what army?" Marcus shouted from the corner, his face pale. "Silas has fortified the mountain passes. They hold the high ground. It would be a slaughter, and Lisa knows our battle formations better than we do." At the mention of her name, a muscle feathered in Cassian's jaw. The room descended into a chaotic shouting match, a cacophony of desperate men realizing they were trapped. Cassian tuned them out. His gaze drifted to the window, to the snow falling gently over the estate gardens. He remembered Lisa sitting on the bench beneath a weeping willow, a ledger in her lap, her brow furrowed in concentration as she balanced the kingdom's future on the tip of her pen. He had taken her brilliance for granted. He had assumed her quiet strength would always simply be there, a safety net for his reckless fire. The heavy oak doors creaked open, and Elena slipped into the room. She wore a heavy fur cloak over a silken nightgown, looking deeply inconvenienced. "Cassian," Elena whined, oblivious to the murderous glares of the generals. "The cooks are saying there is no refined sugar for the pastries today, and the seamstress cannot finish my gown for the new year because the silk shipments are stalled. You have to fix this." The room went dead silent. The generals stared at Elena as if she had just grown a second head. Cassian slowly looked up. He stared at the golden-haired woman standing in the doorway. The woman he had thought he needed. The ghost of his youth that had cost him everything. He looked at her pouting lips and her empty, demanding eyes, and a wave of profound, nauseating clarity washed over him. She was useless. She was a hollow ornament in a kingdom that was burning to the ground. "Get out," Cassian whispered. Elena blinked. "Excuse me?" "Get out," Cassian roared, the sound tearing from his chest with the concussive force of an alpha's command. The glass in the windows rattled. Elena shrieked, stumbling backward into the corridor, her face pale with terror. Cassian turned back to his generals, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with a desperate, frantic light. "Ready my horse," Cassian ordered. Marcus stepped forward. "Cassian, you can't. The treasury—" "Forget the treasury. Forget the tariffs," Cassian barked, marching toward the door. "I am right into the dead zone. I am requesting a parley with King Silas." "Sire, he will kill you," Commander Thorne protested. "Let him try," Cassian said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "I am not going there to fight for the river. I am going to get her back." The dead zone was a desolate, frozen expanse of no man's land, separating the two kingdoms. The wind howled across the flat plains, whipping snow into blinding vortexes. Cassian stood alone in the center of the ice, his heavy fur cloak billowing around him. He had left his vanguard a mile behind. He wore no armor, only his sword at his hip. He was freezing, but the cold didn't register. His heart was hammering a frantic, agonizing rhythm against his ribs. Through the whiteout, two silhouettes emerged. They rode immense, jet-black war horses that seemed to glide over the snow. As they drew closer, Cassian's breath hitched. King Silas sat atop his mount, wrapped in black furs, looking every inch the terrifying warlord of the north. But Cassian's eyes were locked solely on the rider beside him, Lisa. She wore a riding habit of dark, reinforced leather, lined with silver fox fur. Her dark hair was braided tight against her scalp, and her posture was impeccably straight. She looked powerful. She looked untouchable. They brought their horses to a halt 10 paces from Cassian. Silas remained silent, his dark, fathomless eyes watching the Valyrian king with predatory amusement. "You requested a parley, King Cassian." Lisa spoke first. Her voice carried over the wind, cold and professional. Speak your terms. Cassian took a step forward, his chest tight. Lisa, please, come down. State your terms, she repeated, her expression unchanging. My terms are you, Cassian said, his voice breaking. He ignored Silas entirely. I was a fool. I was arrogant, and I was stupid, and I broke the best thing that ever happened to me. Elena is gone. She's banished. I need you, Lisa. The kingdom needs you. Come home. Lisa looked down at him. For a fleeting second, Cassian searched her dark eyes for a flicker of the warmth she used to reserve only for him. He searched for the woman who used to read by the fire in his study. He found nothing but glacial ice. I am home, Cassian, Lisa said softly. Cassian recoiled as if she had struck him. You don't belong with him. He's a monster. He's using you to destroy me. He respects me, Lisa countered, her voice rising slightly over the wind. He saw my mind before he saw my face. You kept me in your study to clean up your messes. Silas brought me to his war council to conquer a continent. Lisa, Cassian pleaded, sinking to one knee in the snow. The great Alpha King, bowing before a human woman. I love you. I will give you anything. Half the treasury, a seat on the High Council. Just come back to me. Silas finally shifted in his saddle. He reached over, his black-gloved hand resting lightly, protectively, on the pommel of Lisa's saddle. It was a subtle gesture, but it screamed of a bond forged in mutual, terrifying ambition. You misunderstand the situation, Cassian. Silas purred, a dark smile playing on his lips. She does not want a seat on your council. Lisa looked at the man she had loved, watching him kneel in the snow, broken and defeated by his own hubris. The residual ache in her chest, the phantom pain of his betrayal, finally evaporated into the freezing air. She was free. The parley is over, Lisa said, turning her horse away. Pay the tariffs, Cassian, or prepare to lose the South. As Lisa and Silas rode back into the blinding snow, returning to the fortress of iron and ice, Cassian remained kneeling in the snow. He listened to the sound of her horse's hooves fading into the storm, entirely alone in the dying kingdom he had built. Realizing too late that a king is only as powerful as the queen who holds his crown. In the game of power, betrayal is often the catalyst for evolution. Lisa's journey from a heartbroken outcast to the architect of an empire proves that true strength lies not in physical dominance, but in sharp intellect and unyielding self-worth. She didn't just survive the storm. She became the ice that froze her enemies in their tracks. If you loved this story of vengeance, strategy, and rising from the ashes, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Let us know in the comments below. Would you have forgiven Cassian, or would you have chosen the King of Ice? Stay tuned for more epic tales of power and romance.